Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: a Chinese company is suing the Pentagon to get off its blacklist. This after the DoD reportedly considered removing a different Chinese firm from the list after a lawsuit.
There's a bit of a constitutional issue that I'm a little murky about.
TikTok is fighting back against a looming divestment deadline this January. The Chinese-owned platform is now taking its case to a federal appeals court, claiming the Justice Department got it wrong. A group of U.S. state attorney generals are probing Temu over its ties with the Chinese Communist Party. They allege the online retailer has harvested U.S. user data and sold products made by forced labor in China. And ahead of the Democratic National Convention next week, a lawsuit against police body cams that contain Chinese microchips is getting fast-tracked. A law enforcement tech competitor warns it's about more than just business. Before we dive into today's top story, we have some announcements to share. China in Focus will pause our daily coverage from August 19th to the 22nd. But don't worry, starting next Monday, NTD's Steve Lance and I will bring you live coverage of the Democratic National Convention. We'll have on-the-ground access, in-depth analysis, and a lot more prepared for you during our live special broadcast of the Nation Decides 2024. Take a look.
The biggest Democratic Party event of the year. 4 nights, tens of thousands in Chicago, celebrating the nomination of the Democratic ticket.
We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans.
Watch NTD's live special coverage with Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer on the Nation Decides 2024 Democratic National Convention, 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday on NTD News.
Another Chinese company is suing the Pentagon to get off its blacklist. One of China's leading microchip equipment makers, called AMEC, filed a lawsuit against the Defense Department Friday. That's for being labeled as a Chinese military company. The Defense Department said AMEC works with Beijing's military and added the company to a blacklist this January. AMEC denies the designation. In a statement to NTD, the Pentagon said it cannot provide information regarding ongoing litigation. AMEC's lawsuit comes after the news that the Pentagon reportedly considered removing a Chinese company from the blacklist. The company, called Hesai, sued the Pentagon to get off its blacklist. Hesai makes LiDAR sensors used in smart cars. LiDAR works by creating a digital map of the car's surroundings. Some U.S. lawmakers have raised concerns that the technology could collect data on American drivers and that the company might share those details with China. The Pentagon ban would block the U.S. military and contractors from using Hesai's LiDAR products starting in 2026. The Financial Times reported the DoD was considering removing Hesai from its blacklist after deciding that it did not meet the legal criteria to be included. The report cited unnamed sources. NTD reached out to the Pentagon for clarification, which said it could not provide further information. Reacting to the news, Congressman John Mulinar wrote on X that if the United States allows Chinese Communist Party affiliated firms like Hesai to dominate our market, we will cede our vehicles, factories, ports, and other critical infrastructure to direct CCP surveillance and manipulation. Mulinar is the chairman of the House Select China Committee. Senator Rick Scott and Marco Rubio also called on the Pentagon to reverse the decision. Stephen Yates is the former White House Deputy National Security Advisor. He weighed in on Hesai's lawsuit against the Pentagon.
When you are looking at non-U.S. citizens and non-U.S. entities, what right to due process do they have in the United States? We should basically have those that come from the People's Republic of China as guilty until proven innocent. That is the standard when you're dealing with national security and an entity that has been willing to challenge us, our allies, not just in military affairs, but on our own homeland and otherwise.
Back to AMEC, it has played a key role in China's push to develop its domestic microchip industry. Semiconductors are at the heart of U.S.-China competition. TikTok is pushing back against a federal law that gives its Chinese parent company ByteDance until mid-January to sell the app or face removal from U.S. app stores. TikTok told a federal appeals court Thursday that the Justice Department misstated the social media app's ties to China and made factual errors in the case. TikTok is also arguing the law would take away its free speech rights. It compared its platform to organizations owned by foreign entities like Reuters and Business Insider. The White House says it doesn't want a ban on TikTok. It wants to see the company's China-based ownership ended on national security grounds. In a separate filing Thursday evening, the DOJ asked to submit evidence under seal. That's because it says the case contains classified top-secret information. TikTok has opposed the request. Oral arguments in the case start next month on the 16th. 21 U.S. state attorneys general are questioning Temu over its ties to the Chinese Communist Party, citing congressional reports. They allege the online retailer has harvested U.S. user data and sold products made by forced labor in China. Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen, along with 20 of his colleagues, sent a letter to the company on Thursday. The letter said the state of Montana is concerned about data collection practices by both Temu and its parent firm PDD Holdings. Companies are bound by law to turn over consumer information to the Chinese regime when it requests it. Officials gave Temu 30 days to disclose any information surrounding its data collection practices. What's more, earlier this year, the House Select Committee on the CCP found Temu failed to comply with U.S. anti-forced labor law. The company reportedly sourced materials from China-based suppliers without checking their supply chains. China remains America's most consequential strategic competitor now and in the coming decades. Navigating a stable relationship against mounting threats has been a top priority for the Biden administration. NTD's Arlene Richards reviews the presidential candidate's approaches to trade and manufacturing in the U.S.-China relationship.
China, it's still the biggest threat to the United States.
No country presents a broader, more severe threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security than China.
With a rapidly growing military, China has the power to reshape the international order to its liking.
When I talk about the threat posed by China, I mean the government of China, in particular led by the CCP.
Despite the challenges, managing the U.S.'s relationship with one of its powerful rivals has become a top foreign policy priority. But where do the presidential candidates stand on some of the issues involved? Trade and manufacturing. Former President Trump historically has been tough on China. During his presidency, the Trump administration issued 8 executive orders that primarily involved China. Topics range from human rights abuse to blocking the financing of communist Chinese military companies. An additional 7 orders affected key policy areas involving China, such as trade and manufacturing and threats to the domestic supply chain. Under those orders, Trump sought to expand trade in a way that would make it freer and fairer for all Americans and eliminate the free trade practice. From the beginning of his presidency, Trump called for tighter trade practices, eventually launching a trade war with China. He imposed tariffs ranging from 10 to 25% on over $300 billion of Chinese goods. These moves were intended to stop China's unfair practice of forcing businesses to share their intellectual property secrets. Trump vows to continue this practice if he is reelected. He's now proposing a 10% across-the-board tariff on all U.S. imports, as well as a 60% tariff on imports from China.
By phasing in tariffs and restrictions, we will phase out imports of all essential goods from China.
And Trump makes another promise.
And we will bring those jobs and factories back to South Carolina and our other great states.
According to the White House archives, Trump's policy created more than 1.2 million manufacturing and construction jobs. Despite these achievements, the United Auto Workers Union has endorsed Kamala Harris. During her 2020 run for president, Harris walked the picket line with striking auto workers. Her promises to the union have not focused on trade deals with China, but rather on speaking out against the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, which replaced NAFTA, a long-standing agreement that had eliminated tariffs on merchandise. The revised USMCA agreement eliminated free trade and created more balanced reciprocal trade supporting high-paying jobs for Americans. As Senator, Harris opposed the revision, saying it failed on the climate crisis. Harris hasn't commented about trade with China in recent campaign stops, but she argued against Trump's tariffs in her 2020 vice presidential debate with Mike Pence.
On the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris,
let's talk about that. The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war.
She said the trade war caused a manufacturing recession. According to an April 2020 report by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate in 2019 fell to its lowest level in 50 years at 3.5%. As vice president, Harris has supported Biden's policies on China. During the 2020 presidential race, Biden criticized Trump's tariffs on China, saying in an X post that Trump didn't know basic economics and that the tariffs were being paid by the American people. But he kept the tariffs in place. In May, Biden announced new tariffs on $18 billion of China's imports to combat unfair competition against American workers.
For years, the Chinese government has poured state money into Chinese companies across a whole range of industries.
It's not clear whether or not Harris will continue the tariffs. But in 2019, prior to becoming vice president, she said she is not a protectionist Democrat and opposed widespread tariffs. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A lawsuit is targeting police body cameras made with Chinese microchips. The aim is to ban the body cameras from political events. It's being expedited in federal court. That could include the Democratic National Convention in Chicago next week. The lawsuit cites a potential espionage threat at presidential campaign events. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg explains.
The lawsuit against Chinese microchip maker Quectel was filed last month by competitor tech startup Government GPT. Government GPT said in its filing Quectel microchips in the Axon Body 4 camera allow potential real-time surveillance, GPS tracking, and data interception by foreign adversaries. The lawsuit says the police cameras are compromising security of law enforcement operations and high-profile events. The suit also accuses Axon of anti-competitive practices, listing Microsoft as a defendant for hosting Axon on its servers. Axon is the biggest supplier of police body cams in the U.S. Government GPT isn't the first to accuse the company of being a risk. The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party has asked for Quectel to be added to the Biden administration's blacklist. The committee recommended the chipmaker be listed as a Chinese military company to stop U.S. investment in January this year. The FCC has asked federal agencies to add Quectel to the restricted entity list. Quectel denies their chips collect any data and says they don't pose a national security risk. Axon's recent court filing stated it vetted Quectel and says no data is stored on Quectel's chips or servers. District Judge Susan Brnovich will hold a status conference in the case on Tuesday next week. She says there's no evidence of an actual known threat, but agreed to expedite the case. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
A new missile could give the U.S. an upper hand if it gets into a conflict with Beijing in the South China Sea, an expert told Reuters. The missile is called AIM-174B. The U.S. Navy confirmed it's in active service. This missile has an extra long range, meaning it could strike targets from as far as 250 miles away. It's almost 3 times the range of a standard U.S. missile. Having an extra long-range missile means the aircraft carrier doesn't have to get as close when striking the enemy, making it safer to deploy. A major U.S. ally in the Pacific, Australia, is also capable of launching the missile from its own fighter jets. A Taiwanese expert told Reuters that the missile's long strike capability would help ensure safety of U.S. carrier groups. Next, hypersonic missiles are a super-speed weapon that both China and Russia have on hand, but the U.S. and its allies don't have ready for deployment. U.S. lawmakers said the U.S. and Australia are now looking to collaborate on making hypersonic missiles together for the first time. NTD's Flora Hua has the details. Flora, please tell us more.
Yes, Tiff. Here's the chair of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCall. He recently visited hypersonic companies in Australia.
We have a defense industrial base problem. That means we cannot manufacture weapon systems
fast enough for the current threat model, coming from Putin in Europe to the Ayatollah in the Middle East and now Chairman Xi in the Pacific. But if we collaborate together, that manufacturing can speed up, if you will, and innovate, the technology to move more quickly to counter the modern day threat that we see, coming out of China.
McCall said a Chinese hypersonic weapon could hit Australia in a matter of minutes, and Australia cannot stop that right now. Senior U.S. defense official Jeffrey McCormick told Congress in March that China has the most advanced hypersonic weapons in the world, and they could reach U.S. military bases in the Western Pacific. Hypersonic missiles can travel at least 5 times the speed of sound. Their recent use by Russia in the Ukraine war sparked concern among NATO members. Then U.S. Air Force General Glenn Van Herk warned last year that hypersonic weapons are extremely difficult to detect and counter.
Flora, thanks for that. Surveillance cameras in eastern Taiwan captured the moments when a powerful earthquake struck earlier today. A 6.3 magnitude quake struck the city of Hualien. Telephone poles shook and bridges swayed, but no immediate damage was reported. This was the second quake in 24 hours to hit eastern Taiwan. Weather officials warned of the risk of landslides in mountain areas following days of rain. Taiwan lies near the junction of 2 tectonic plates and is prone to earthquakes. In April, Hualien was hit by Taiwan's largest quake in at least 25 years. 9 people were killed and more than 900 injured. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform, Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A mysterious threat in China. Pandemic fears resurface as cities like Beijing run emergency drills for a so-called unknown pneumonia. Is a possible new outbreak on the horizon?
This situation highlights 2 key issues. First, the COVID-19 epidemic is still very serious in China. Second, there seems to be another emerging illness that hasn't been publicly disclosed.
A Pacific Island nation says no to China, standing with Taiwan instead. The president of Palau tells Beijing it's not about money. And 2 countries were the biggest buyers of Russian oil last month. Find out who they are after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.